Oklahoma City, 2025 NBA champions by a final score of 103-99. They win their very first championship in the history of the Thunder franchise. Obviously, the same organization, the Seattle Supersonics, won the title back in 1979. Ironically, in an era full of parity in the NBA. I'll touch on that later on the show, why I think this is actually not the greatest thing for the NBA, and I've touched on that for a while. But congrats to Oklahoma City. Congrats to Mark Dagnall, the coach. Congrats to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, the whole crew. And a big congrats to Sam Presti, who constructed this team from the jump. You understand the big three that he had in OKC with Harden and Westbrook and Kevin Durant, got to finals in 2012, didn't want to pay the luxury tax, decided to pay Serge Ibaka over James Harden. That didn't work out so well. KD departs in 2016. Westbrook is traded in 2019. And they built this thing in large part from the Paul George trade, which netted them SGA and eventually Jalen Williams. And so, and Sam Presti has a bevy of draft picks in the next half decade. So the Thunder are going to be a contender for years to come. I'll touch on whether or not they can become a dynasty. But what is, in pro sports, when it comes to constructing rosters, what is probably the most cliche, tired, old saying ever? It's a copycat league. But it's true. Cliches, in some respect, have some truth baked into them. And what's going to happen, what you're going to see, particularly if Oklahoma City continues to be successful, again, we'll touch on whether they can be a dynasty or not, is that teams are going to build their roster like the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're going to build the roster saying, okay, we'll have our superstar, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Doesn't necessarily have to be a guard per se. It can be anyone. It's someone who can get their own shots whenever they want, however they want. But beyond that, just a bunch of two-way players. Chet Holmgren, who had a bad offensive finals last night. I believe he had 5 blocks. He was a great rim protector all series and all season in the games he was healthy. He missed many games of this season for Oklahoma City. Lou Dort, maybe the best on-ball defender in the league among guards. He's probably taken that title from Drew Holiday and can hit threes. Alex Caruso, not that much worse than Lou Dort at guard in the perimeter. He had Siakam in the blender at times last night and throughout the series and can hit threes. You look up and down the list, Jalen Williams, can defend. SGA is an excellent defender. Is tremendous on that end of the floor. And so this is what we're going to see teams start to build. You saw folks do it. You saw teams, in particular the Houston Rockets, who weren't successful. The Boston Celtics, who last year were successful, just not in the way, I guess, that they were intending to be, at trying to recreate the Golden State Warriors. Hey, wherever our best player averaged 25 plus. In the case of the Rockets, James Harden was averaging 30 plus. In the case of Tatum, averaging around that, 27, 28 a game. And then it's just going to be a bunch of three-point shooters, which was a flawed way to build a roster because that's not how Golden State built their roster. It wasn't just threes. They were the best defensive basketball. They had size early in that dynasty, and obviously Steve Kerr is an all-time great head coach. And you saw teams try to copy that mold for the Warriors. We've seen this in the NFL. I would argue that the second to most recent dynasty, the Chiefs, the current dynasty right now, the one before them was obviously the Patriots. I would argue the Seattle Seahawks between 2012 and 2016, like when they were winning playoff games, going to Super Bowls, they won a Super Bowl in 13. You could argue, with the exception of they had an unbelievable back in his prime, as opposed to New England didn't really have that early in their dynasty, that the Seahawks built their dynasty the way the Patriots did early on. Kind of a game manager quarterback, good offensive line, awesome defense, defensive coach, play keep away, ball control. That was what Seattle did. That's really what the Patriots did. The problem is Seattle didn't have Tom Brady. Russ was good. Russ in his prime was a good quarterback. Obviously not the greatest ever. The shooters in Boston, not Steph Curry. And a lot of these teams are going to try and recreate a roster. They obviously, in the case of just about every team in the league, don't have a guy like SGA, and they don't have the just bevy of guys that can defend on both sides of the floor and shoot threes. Caruso did it this year. KCP with the Nuggets 2 years ago. Derek White this last year for Boston. Like, you're seeing a slow sort of shift into, yes, we are going to shoot threes. We're going to be excellent from the three-point line, but we also got to defend. It's never been a more talented league in the history of the game from a perimeter scoring perspective, and so we need to adjust to that. And Sam Presti, smartest GM in basketball, was ahead of the curve on it. And what I think is really fitting for the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think last night, obviously, we'll talk about the Halliburton injury. No one on planet Earth wanted that to happen. But aside from that, I think it was so fitting that the Oklahoma City Thunder won Game 7 last night in the fashion that they won 68 games in the regular season and are tied for third all-time in wins in a single season and playoffs with 84. They did it with their defense. We could show you this graphic. The Pacers offensively held their own. They shot better from the field than Oklahoma City, shot way better from three than Oklahoma City, shot better from the line, grabbed more rebounds than OKC, which shocked me a little bit. But folks have talked about, the analytics revolution in the NBA. Here's OKC's analytics. We're going to take 17 more shots than you do. Well, after a while, that just becomes a math problem for the Pacers and everybody who plays the Thunder. You're not even going to get shots against us. It's going to be shot clock violations. We're going to jump the passing lane. We're going to force you in the paint, make you make a bad pass to the perimeter, which we saw a lot tonight. Last night. We saw it in game one. That's the type of team that we're going to be. We're just going to take more shots than you do. Forget taking more threes. You're not going to get the number of attempts we do. And that obviously was the difference in that basketball game last night. And the Thunder, I've said it's so fascinating. Listen, I'm going to be 22 years old this Saturday. I'm a young whippersnapper in the scheme of things, but I certainly know my NBA history. I can't recall many teams in the history of the game that go on long runs the way Oklahoma City did in that third quarter to really separate, to get it to a 21-point lead, with their defense being the catalyst for the runs. See, the Golden State Warriors, I'm a Warriors fan. The Warriors it would be a tie game, and then they'd hit you with a 15-point plus, point differential third quarter. Steph would go berserk. Clay would hit a couple. With the KD years, KD would get buckets in transition. He'd hit threes. Draymond would be orchestrating the fast breaks. Like, that was how they did it. The 2012, 2013 Heat, in my mind, one of the greatest teams ever. And they'll actually be touched on a little bit later as it relates to this Thunder team. But it was a lot of fast break, transition, right? Mario Chalmers pushing on the break and LeBron James and Dwayne Wade doing the rest. OKC, it's fueled by their defense. We're going to get our buckets. Buckets will come in time. You just are not going to score on us. And you can say, listen, the Halliburton injury obviously impacted the fact that, Indiana only scored 91 points in this game, which ironically is only what the Thunder scored in game 6, in which I kind of crushed them for that. But that's who Oklahoma City is. That's who they want to be. That's who Presti constructed this team into being. And now the dream has been realized. The vision has been put forth for this OKC team to win. And I think it's fitting the way they won that basketball game last night. And so, listen, you give credit to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I did want to talk about Shai for a little bit. Again, we'll touch on the Halliburton injury, which was just sickening to watch. Not just in terms of Achilles injuries are kind of gruesome. You hate, like you saw the replay where it just popped, like, ugh, you hate that. But for Shai, so I'll touch on whether this is, the greatest, or what, not certainly not the greatest, one of the greatest single season teams of all time. Here's what I know without a shadow of a doubt for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, for the record, is 26 years old. He's now an MVP. He's a conference finals MVP, which got introduced only 3 years ago, and is a finals MVP, and he's a champion, leading the Thunder to their first title in the history of the OKC franchise. Here's what I know about Shai. He just completed one of the greatest seasons in the history of the NBA, and we can show you the numbers. Do we have this right here? So, guys to win MVP, finals MVP in the same season. See if you've heard of any of these names by chance. Willis Reed, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Moses Malone, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's the list he joins. He also joins this even more exclusive list. Guys to win finals MVP, to win the scoring title and win finals MVP in the same season. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He also, and I wrote this down, and this is remarkable, you can make a case that this is one of the greatest guard seasons of all time. Like in the short list, top 3 or 4, he is the first, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the first guard to go 32 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block since Michael Jordan in 1988. Not even Jordan's championship seasons. He actually, individually speaking, Jordan was actually, his numbers were a little bit better prior to that. Obviously, Phil Jackson comes in, Scottie Pippen's development. We know how that became for the Bulls dynasty. But that's what he's doing. He's also, Shai is the first guy, we hear about 50, 40, 90. Well, 50, 35, 90 ain't bad either. 50% from the field, 35% from 3, 90% from the free throw line. He is the first guy to do that since Steph Curry in 2016, which, by the way, Steph won unanimous MVP that season. Shai was the MVP this regular season, and rightfully so. You look at this Thunder team, And we'll see how they continue to develop. We'll see if they do become a dynasty. Frankly, in the modern era with the current CBA, which I've voiced for the last 2 years, I despise because it actually prevents dynasties from happening. I'll talk about the parity in the league later in the show with the last 7 champions being different teams. But this guy can be the face of that. He's capable. I'm not saying they will, but he's capable of doing that. Because Jalen Williams, who, by the way, year 3, right? He had a 40-point game in the finals in game 5 in year 3. So you see what that kid's continue to develop. He struggled handling the basketball. There was a wrist injury going on. We're going to give him a little bit of a pass because it's hard to handle basketball when you got a wrist injury and have for months. Chet Holmgren missed most of the season. Isaiah Hartenstein missed big chunks of the season. And listen, you look up and down the roster. I'm not trying to shortchange these guys because I just complimented them a second ago. But guys like Lou Dort, like Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace and these guys, they're crucially important to this team. But coming into the season, did we view them as that? When MVPs, what all-time great players do is elevate these guys. And that's what Shai did. And listen, he, by the way, happens to have the most games in a single postseason of 30 points and 5 assists. Which, by the way, what's funny is Shai didn't even shoot the ball that well at all last night. He had 25, or so I think it was 29 and 12, was it? 29 and 12 for Shai. But he was 8 for 27 for the field, 2 for 12 from 3. Again, Oklahoma City's defense getting the job done when it really counted. But, man, it is... I have been, and this is probably the final time I'll say this, hopefully, I have been critical of Shai in the sense, not his game. His game's awesome. Handle, mid-range jumper. He can shoot the 3. I think he'll actually get better shooting the 3-point ball because if he adds that to his game consistently, holy crap, this guy's going to be an even more unstoppable force than the guy who just averaged 32, 33 a game on crazy efficiency in the regular season. It's the fact, not that he gets to the line. I think I read 29 MVPs in history got to the line more times than Shai got in his MVP season. It's not that Shai gets to the line, it's how he gets to the line. That was kind of the issue. And I think the boiling point was game 1 against the Minnesota Timberwolves, where it is, okay, you're not efficient, which is odd for Shai. And so you're just throwing your body into non-basketball positions to get to the line. And we saw that points the regular season, which drove me crazy, drove a lot of people crazy. This isn't basketball. You're too great to be doing this, Shai. And so that was kind of the knock for me and for others. But you got to give the kid his credit, got to give him some love. And listen, Chris Paul feels like had something to do with this. Chris Paul was, with the Oklahoma City Thunder in Shai's first year there and was really impactful for that basketball team, kind of helped Shai develop and grow and whatnot. And so, man, nothing but love to Shai, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They won it their way. Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. The Thunder won it their way. And Shai just completed one of the greatest guard seasons in the history of the National Basketball Association. It is Jordan's 88 season, Steph's 2016 season. You can maybe throw an Oscar Robertson season in there for, potentially. And I think it's Shai in 2025. Among guards, that's about as good as you're going to get. Shout out to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the champion Oklahoma City Thunder. And I have to say this as well, folks. And feel free, appreciate everybody tuning in on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Feel free to chime in the comment section. Let me know what you think. For me personally, I must admit, big weight off my back. Big time. Because I don't have the greatest history predicting finals. I've said, outside of series involving my beloved Golden State Warriors, I've never gotten the finals right. Now I have. I had Thunder in 6. Sue me, it went 7. So in that regard, maybe I have a little bit extra credibility today. This was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander after the game.
Feels amazing. So much weight off my shoulders. So much stress relieved. No matter what, you go into every night wanting to win, and sometimes it just doesn't go your way. And tonight could have been one of those nights, but we found a way. I'm so proud of this group. I wouldn't have rather done it with any other group in the world. It feels good to be a champion.
No question about it. So shout out to Shai and the Thunder. And obviously, we'll be talking about them all throughout the show. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. And be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.